Anyway, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the release cycle because I know that there is actually some confusion in the community, and for new projects, this is important information. The release cycle is it starts with a plan. And the plan doesn't necessarily need to be very detailed, but projects need to start their every release cycle with some idea in mind of what they're going to implement. And the plan doesn't need to be particularly detailed. A description of the sorts of activities, the sorts of things that are important for the release. One of the things we haven't actually talked about this during the last Hangout was you can actually associate bugs directly with your release. If you create milestones in Bugzilla that have names that match the ID or the name of your release in the project metadata, we automatically generate a page of bugs that are associated or targeted for that release, and we consider that a reasonable kind of minimal plan. Ideally, a plan should also have a number of themes, the kinds of things you're working on. You know, perhaps UI improvements, bug fixes is a decent theme. You know, maybe evolution of certain APIs or the addition of in particular features. These are all potential themes. And the idea behind specifying this information in a plan is that it gives the community, it gives potential contributors some idea of how they can contribute in a positive way to the project. You know, the idea is to try and grow the diversity of the project. In fact, we're starting to see some examples of projects, we regularly see examples of projects that fail to grow diversity and then ultimately fail themselves, right? So for us, the continued viability of projects is pretty important, and part of that is attracting contributions and growing your development community. And to do that, there's lots of great things you can do, outreach, but sort of the minimal thing you can do is set up plans at the beginning of release cycles. Now, as you go through a release cycle, the plan may change, and that's perfectly reasonable. When that plan does change, though, it's important to communicate that change. So we have the project management infrastructure. Every project has their project information in there and project metadata. Keep that up to date. As project themes change or project direction changes, update the plan. Communicate those changes with your community through the dev list. The people who are involved in your project should be monitoring your dev list, and that's just keep in touch with them. This is also a great way, incidentally, to engage adopters, people who are going to be using your project in their products and other open source projects. Communication is really a key part of that. As you are going through a release, we expect that you are producing some number of milestones. Now, that number really needs to be bigger than 0. I don't know that it needs to be much bigger than 0. With participation in the simultaneous release, they do 7 milestones and then a total of 4 release candidate builds. So each of those are important milestones, and they give the community a chance to pull in the work that you're doing. And again, it's about adopters knowing what to expect from your release, and potential contributors knowing how they can help improve your release. These milestone builds are potentially used by generally intended for testing and preparing for the final release, but they're a great source of feedback, and it's I strongly encourage projects to produce at least 1 milestone build during their release cycle. Finally, we get to the actual release event, and we bookend the release cycle. The capture of the plan is at one end, and then the release is at the other end, and we sort of bookend the documentation with a release review. Now, the release review is a bit of a retrospective. What did we do? What does this include? Pragmatically speaking, a release review document doesn't have to be particularly detailed. In fact, the project management infrastructure allows you to just modify the release record to modify the description. The list of issues then becomes, rather than a list of issues that you're going to be addressing, they become a list of issues you have addressed. There's some other fields to provide additional information to describe things like maybe standards implemented by the project, new API changes, deprecated functionality, things that, well, frankly, anybody who has been participating in your release cycle should probably already know, but it consolidates it all in one place where, for at least certainly for historical purposes, we can know what, summarize perhaps, massive amounts of discussion that has occurred in bugs and in releases, but more immediately, it helps adopters and again the community understand what it is that's in your release. Another thing that we don't strictly require, but I strongly recommend, and in fact we may actually be going in a stronger direction this way, is a new and noteworthy. Definitely a strong recommendation. New and noteworthies can address different communities. They can address the adopter community, or they can address the user community. I guess it really depends on the nature of your project and the nature of the community that you address. When you come to that release point, just a couple of things to think about. We have a restriction that the board has asked us to run at most 2 release review sessions a month. Rather than set them in stone ahead of time, we tend to try and be dynamic, generally. The simultaneous release is always a bit of an exception. But we do try to be dynamic. Basically, we schedule the release reviews based on who's asking and for when. This sometimes winds up, making some conflict. Occasionally, we wind up running a 3rd review period, but generally, we try to fit the reviews that we run into the kind of two per month the structure, and that seems to be working. For a review though, for a release, really I really want, one of the important takeaways from today is these take time. And you need to prepare in advance. Now, if you go on the development resources page of the wiki, it's wiki.eclipse.org/development_resources. There's a link there to the release cycle. Every committer should be familiar with that development resources page, by the way. That includes links to really just about everything a committer should need to know. Anyway, the release review section in the release cycle document has a handy graphic, which frankly I wish I had the technology to show you. But anyway, we'll get that sorted. A minimum of a full, basically try to get this started a full 2 weeks ahead. It's a good idea to ask us about when your review period is going to be as soon as you can, as soon as you know. Because again, like I said, we tend to try and be as accommodating as possible and schedule these as they come in. So, the earlier you are, the more likely you are to get the date you want. A release review has to happen before you actually do the release. It doesn't have to be on the same day. So if you want to release on a Friday, we'll try to see if we can get it so the release review is on the Wednesday. Release reviews always end on Wednesday. It's just the way that we've always done things, and it seems to be working. So I guess the one thing you can count on. So as early as possible, we need you to start assembling that review documentation and assemble the IP log in parallel. Now, a minimum of 2 weeks ahead, we really need you to submit that IP log for review. The IP team tends to get through these pretty quickly, but based on their workflow, it's difficult to know for certain. If you get it 2 weeks ahead, then we'll be confident. We're pretty confident that we will have it approved by the IP team that at least 1 week ahead of the end of the review. So we really need to have that IP log approved before we start the 1 week review period. We also need the review documentation, and we need that review documentation approved by your PMC. Now, this can take time. Again, generally PMCs are pretty responsive. I'm impressed by sometimes the amount of detail that PMCs go into. The amount of documentation you require for a review is really the PMC's call. The PMC may ask for more detail on certain features, and again, I'm impressed by how much time they spend, some of these PMC members spend reviewing documentation to make sure that you're providing what the community needs to see. So I anticipate that taking some time. I really can't start a release review until I have that PMC approved review documentation and the IP team approved IP log. So getting those prepared at least a full 2 weeks ahead of when you want to run the release review makes everybody's life very, much easier. Now, those of you that have engaged in these have noticed that over the last couple of years, I started creating bugs to keep track of these releases, and slowly we've been sort of pulling you into these. Originally, they were just something I did so that I didn't lose my mind. But now we're starting to turn these into the communication channel for the review. And I think that makes a lot of sense. There's one place. It's not, we don't have to worry about things getting lost in email. Everything is going to be captured in the bug. So as soon as we know that you want to do a release review, and the only way that we really know that is by you asking. If you ask us to do a release review by, frankly, submitting an IP log for approval, that's a flag for us that, hey, they're doing a review. We'll open up a bug, copy you on that bug, make sure the project lead is, of course, copied on that bug, and then all communication about the release will happen through that bug from that point on.
So if I could just quickly jump in, like it's great, you know, everyone's starting to really use the bugs a lot more, and it makes it a lot easier to actually go back in the history. And, you know, you certainly email us at emo.eclipse.org, but keep everything on the bug. You know, certainly gives the historical context and it's the easier for everyone that's involved in the project to see what's going on, because we found it much easier for ourselves, and in some cases it's just a lot quicker to turn around for everyone to know what's going on and have the context of what's happening with the project. So you know, to keep it up, it really helps us. And I also notice a lot of projects are finding it an easy way to, you know, keep everyone in the community engaged with what's happening. So
yeah, that's good. So for review documentation, we have historically accepted presentations and HTML documents, and there's been a lot of flexibility in that regard. We've created the PMI partially to try and make this a little bit more consistent. One of the challenges that I've had in the past is, you know, a big part of my job is disseminating this information to the community, and when I get information in all sorts of different formats, it makes it difficult for me to do anything in any kind of automated way, or, you know, or in any kind of consistent way. Or if I get a bunch of bullet points and I get a paragraph or get a picture, you know, these are all wonderful things, but it makes it difficult for me to send a note out to the community for example, to tell people about these reviews that are coming up, or you know, or maybe to do blogs or anything. I've gone through periods where I've been blogging about reviews and what's, you know, exciting and new, but then it just gets too hard. You know, given the pressures of everything else, if I have to work really hard to figure out how to tell people about your release, it starts to become a secondary thing for me. It just gets harder to do. So the PMI, with the project management infrastructure and the ability to specify in a release record all of the information regarding a release and the corresponding review, makes it very easy for me to take that information and use it when I present at a conference, or use it when I blog, or to tweet about it or something like that. So I strongly encourage, we're at a point now where we're strongly encouraging people to use the project management infrastructure for review documentation. It's not a hard requirement at this point, but we are seriously thinking about it, and sort of in consultation with the Architecture Council, we will talk about making that a requirement. Now, I understand that there's a few deficiencies in the project management infrastructure that we will address. One of them, of course, being the ability to quickly and easily copy review documentation from a previous review or release into a new one. I think that's an easy. It's not exactly a no-brainer, but it's a relatively easy one that I think gives us a big impact and will help everybody with that. So anyway, once we have all of the review documentation in place and the IP log approved, we can start the review period. We try to get all of this stuff assembled on a Wednesday to start a review on a Thursday. On the Thursday or the Friday, we try to send out an email to member committers to tell everybody about what's going on. Sometimes that winds up getting delayed, but we try to get it the Thursday or the Friday. The review runs for a period of 5 business days, and we end it on a Wednesday. We try to get those on a Wednesday morning. Sometimes it's Wednesday afternoon, again, depending on workloads. Frankly, I think we do a reasonably good job of setting up projects for success. These reviews I honestly can't remember the last time I've failed a review because, again, we try and set them up for success from the beginning. But on Wednesday morning, we approve the review. Again, we've evolved to the point where communication is all being done through the bug. We tell you to go ahead and make your release, and then at that point it becomes up to you and project team members to take your build bits and put them onto your download server and your download section and announce it to your community. Anyway, so that's the basic release structure in release review overview. I'm assuming that most of you have been through this, so there may be a few questions. Richard, do we have a means of asking questions?
Yeah, at the moment, it's for this broadcast. It's at emo@eclipse.org. Unfortunately, before I started the broadcast, I should have enabled the questions and answers tab. Now that you actually type in the questions here for us. I just had assumed that when you fire up the broadcast that you could do that, but apparently Google has different ideas. So you can reach us at emo@eclipse.org, and I'm watching the inbox right now.
So I guess we'll linger for a couple of minutes, and then we'll just we'll declare victory, and again use the lessons that we've learned by running the second Hangout and apply those to the third Hangout.
Certainly for the third one. Certainly for the third one.
Well, I'd be careful what you promise with certainty.
I got notes here. I have notes taken down. Anyways, I apologize. But anyways, yeah, we've got it recorded. I posted the first one, so I mean that's a step. In the right direction, maybe not the full direction we need to be at this point, but it is recorded.
Okay, well, I'm going to say that since I don't see anything happening in the MO inbox, I'm going to assume that either the communication channel is not optimal, and we have to we'll sort it out for next time, or that there are no questions. So why don't we just close it up, Richard? We'll put this out for people. Of course, they know that if they have questions, they can just ask us at any time at emo@eclipse.org.
Oh, for sure. At any time, emo@eclipse.org with your questions. If you're interested, we want to broaden this out a little bit to members of the community. If you're interested, you have a topic that you'd like us to talk about, or perhaps you'd like to talk about, just drop us a quick line there at the EMO inbox, and we'll go from there. So the next one will be in 2 weeks' time, and hope to catch up with you then.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one. Have a good weekend, guys.